Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar, which will be looking at different aspects of planning for Interfaith Week 2020. As most of you know, the week runs this year from Sunday the 8th to Sunday the 15th of November, which means the week begins on Remembrance Sunday and ends on Mitzvah Day, enabling groups to highlight the important multi-faith and interfaith dimensions of both of those. Interfaith Week that will this year, of course, look different to how it's looked in past years. The impact of COVID-19 and responses to that mean that different types of activity will need to be considered, and that's something we're going to be exploring in this webinar. There are currently just under 50 people attending. We're expecting another 10 or 12. They are mainly from local and national interfaith bodies, and it's great to have such a wide range of people here represented. We have an excellent panel of contributors whom I will introduce properly as we go through. You should be able to see all of us on your screens at the moment, and we're delighted to have them all with us. Each of the main presenters will begin with a short presentation, followed by sometimes questions and comments on their specific presentation. Toward the end of the meeting, there'll also be time for general questions and comments, and we will open that up for everybody who's on screen to respond to. We are doing this as a Zoom webinar, so unlike normal Zoom meetings, those of you who are attending cannot be seen or heard by other people, so that should reassure you. If you wish to raise questions, you can do this using the Q&A button at the bottom of the main Zoom screen. So you can type a question in there. All members of the panel can see the questions, but I will be feeding them in at appropriate points subject to time. So we won't be typing in responses. We'll do those in a way that everyone can hear. The chat system is not turned on. That's to enable us to focus on the Q&A box rather than having two separate boxes to try and keep up with. Please, if you think of a question, put it in whenever you think of it. We will only look at them at appropriate points, but it's useful to have some stacked up so that we can move through with keeping relatively good time. Where necessary, I will give panel speakers a 1-minute warning toward the end of their inputs. The Q&A function is the only way really to interact through a webinar. So a couple of people have raised hands. If you need to ask us things, the best thing to do is write a question into the Q&A button, and then we will see it. This meeting is being recorded. Obviously, it will only record the panelists. We are planning to publish that in the future on the website so that people who couldn't attend today get the benefit of what's been shared. I think that is everything I need to say by way of practicalities and introduction. So I'm now going to hand over to Narendra Waghela, who is IFN's co-chair, drawn from the local interfaith groups category. He is also a long-standing member of Leicester Council of Faiths, and he's going to offer some opening reflections about Interfaith Week. Narendra.
Good afternoon to you all. Basically, I live in Leicester, which is still locked down, so I'm more jealous about you. Hopefully with wing and prayer, we should be all right by the end of this week and let our brothers celebrate Eid. Otherwise, there will be a problem of not celebrating Eid in a normal manner. As far as the whole world is concerned, it is shrunk, in my opinion. Long gone are those days when my great-grandfather would travel from India to Africa, and it would take him 3 weeks to reach by a clipper boat. Those days are gone. We live in a society where we come across different kind of faiths, different color of people, even whilst we are walking on the street, and they either have a different belief or different faith, but that is plus point because it's all brought us together. And in amongst them, whilst the globe is shrunk, Interfaith Network has done a fantastic work by introducing Interfaith Week, which is what Ashley just mentioned, 8th of November till 15th of November. And I'm right, I think, in saying that it started in 2009. But like anything else, it started very slowly. But by 2012, it picked up such a great momentum that I myself, if I talk about me and me only, I was an onlooker to Interfaith Week. I then became a participant to the same Interfaith Week, and I also became a guest in Interfaith Week. So I've had in my life in Leicester Council of Faiths, I arranged to organize an Interfaith Week in a shopping center where people would come past and ask us all sorts of questions, and we would hand over the leaflets to them. And at the same time, I was very lucky to go to a place called Kirkstall Abbey, which I'm sure Kaneez has heard about it. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And the vibration I got there, or the atmosphere, was so electrifying that it was a small place, but everybody gathered there. They were showing off their garments, their culture, their food, their habits, and it was so good. I wished it was shared in cities and towns as well, because it looks like Interfaith Week should be an interfaith year as such, because there's lots and lots of that we can learn from other faiths and other believers as well. We just live in like a frog in a small pond. We don't ever bother to come out of it to understand and really realize what other communities are doing. Basically, the bottom line is we all share the same beliefs when it comes to any religious books. But here is a chance to meet up with the people. I've also been in an organization or in some kind of a celebration in town hall where Sikh community was teaching me how to wear a turban. Now with this beard on, yes, people thought I was Mr. Singh. So this all happened. But the bottom line is this year, because of the COVID, the whole Interfaith Week will be more challenging, but not only challenging, but more exciting, because during these 3 or 4 months, we've learned a lot about other gadgets and other things that we never knew of. Like, for example, Zoom. I never knew what Zoom was at my age. I'm almost walking to the sunset, and I said, Zoom, what is Zoom? I kind of asked people as to Zoom is now. Zoom brings everybody together from all over the world again. So the world is shrunk. You talk to people in maybe New Zealand and America. So with this virtual so-called facilities, we need to look into doing some kind of a celebration through virtual reality where we can celebrate the whole week, because we know that there may be the social distancing or there may be some other stuff coming in. We don't even know if COVID will kind of re-kick in again at that time, but hopefully with Wing and Prayer, we should be celebrating it with virtual reality. That's all I can say at the moment.
Great, thank you very much, Narendra. And with that wonderful introduction to Interfaith Week and to the possibilities that we have this year, I'm going to introduce our next panelist, which is Kaneez Khan. Kaneez works for Neighbours West Yorkshire, where she is involved with activity across multiple areas within West Yorkshire, and she's based at the Wellsprings Together Centre in Bradford, and works with groups from many different faiths. So Kaneez, it's great to have you. Over to you.
Hello everybody. Thank you for asking me to be here today. I think I want to talk about how to build capacity and how we've done it over here in West Yorkshire. There is only one of me that covers West Yorkshire, but I think what we've done over the past 3 to 4 years is develop capacity and enthusiasm and a wish for more united communities. And how we've done that is by making sure that we've used social media. That's been a really important thing. By coming together as councils, like for example, North Kirklees Interfaith Council, and then using that space to say, look, this is all the positive things that we are doing on the ground to help bring people together within communities. I think when I go to meet people, I always talk about modelling. We should model what we want to see out there. And that doesn't mean we're modeling and we're going to just model all the good things, all the pretty things that are happening. I think having honest conversations at this moment in time, in the capacity, in the era that we're in, if we don't have the honest conversations, we're not going to really make effective change for our next generation of young people. So within the context of that, we've got the church mosque twinning, which was really, really successful. Interfaith Week, I feel as if is so integral to building, to highlighting all the positive work that goes on in West Yorkshire and across the city, across the country. So by having Interfaith Week, what we are doing is modelling to the country how we can come together. So positive activities that have been happening in West Yorkshire. I'll give you one example of them. Within North Kirklees Interfaith Council, there's a gentleman called David Curry, and the year before last, he said, I'm not going to be able to do anything this year. He goes, I'm just not going to have the capacity to do it. It's not going to happen for me. He goes, but I have a will and I really, really want to do something next year. He goes, so I'm not going to rush into this. I know that I want to do something, but I'm going to take my time doing it. So within the year, he worked with the Empathy Group. He worked with Darul al Mosque in Dewsbury, and he's based in Dewsbury, is David Curry. And they worked together to get the first interfaith real event that happened in 2019. Theirs was their first event, and it was over 100 people that turned up. They had food, it was held in a church, but they had Asian food, English food. There were different communities that were coming together, and it was amazing. He thought about it, planned it, didn't rush it, watched maybe how other groups were doing it and thought, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to take my time to do it. And then there's other simple things that you could do, like, for example, when we were handing out the roses in the city centres in North Kirklees, and that was quite easy to hand out roses to communities just to say, we're doing this for Interfaith Week. They're all really, really, really positive things that then when you put them on social media, actually enthuses other people to do them. And actually last year, I think with Kirklees, it was the highest number of activities within the country. And the reason that happened was as well, I have to say that the council supported it. So they have 6 members of cohesion staff within Kirklees Council who have the capacity to help and support these activities to happen. So if you've got council buying, you've got community buying, and you've got people like me supporting as well. You've got the vicars and the churches involved. You've got the mosques involved. And you've got, and within Kirklees, can I just say, mainly is Muslim communities and white British communities in that area. So when that has grown and developed is because there's been buying from almost everyone. But that's not to say that there hasn't been challenges, because there really has. Even though we've got this 1 week of brilliant celebrations across the country of happening and showcasing everybody being together and modeling all of that, throughout the year we're still trying to keep these relationships going. But within the year, within time, challenges come up along the way. But we need to be able to talk about them. If we don't talk about them, we're not going to get past them. Instead, people will go away and take their baggage away with them and think, or actually and sit with their anger rather than having a conversation. We did have a conversation about it. We're having a continual conversation about it, because if we don't, then we're avoiding it, and that's not really healthy for anyone. And within when BLMs come up recently, if we don't have the conversations, again, we're avoiding what's happening and bubbling underneath. We need to be talking all the time. Another thing that has been a challenging thing for me particularly is having majority men around the tables that we sit at as women, as Muslim women, to sit around a table where there's a lot of men is very, very difficult. And then to think about how our voices are going to be valued around that table, that's something as well that needs to be challenged, talked about and persisted on. But I think that there has to be as well, within all of this context, when we're doing this work on the ground and you're actually at grassroots level, there has to be an element of self-care to make sure you take care of yourself while you're doing this, because not all the time is a really wonderful week like Interfaith Week. It is when you're trying to keep on building these relationships on the ground during the year. We still need to be taking care of ourselves, because we keep on coming across challenging conversations that we're having. And these conversations have come out within our Real People on His Talk program, where we've had discussions ranging from misogyny to discrimination to CSC. We've had very, very difficult conversations in West Yorkshire. But if we don't talk about them, then we're not going to address them. And I think that's the really, really big thing for me. By having these conversations, to stay respectful around the table when people do get upset is sometimes not easy for people. But if we are going to get to where we've got a more cohesive society, where we've got everybody that respects each other, to persist in them is really, really important, and to carry on trying to do what we can to make the world a better place. And I think that's really my bit for today, because I found that Interfaith Week has set a real deep foundation for working towards the year to show all the brilliant work that's going on in the community. But then within the year, there is other things that crop up along the way that we should be talking about. And I think it can be as simple as, so for example, if I've got a Hindu friend, which I've recently met with my Hindu friends that I haven't seen for 25 years, and it might be that I'm just going to go out for a meal. It might just start off from there. And then me and my Hindu friend might say, well, I'm going to bring some of my Muslim women and you bring some of your Hindu ladies, and let's have a bigger event together. This is how small things can build up into something really, really brilliant over time and over years. And it doesn't happen overnight. This building of relationships on the ground in communities doesn't happen overnight. I think that's it from me today.
Brilliant, thank you, Kaneez. We've got a few questions pinging in. I think the first one actually is to me, which is how many people are attending. So we're now up to 52 people attending, plus the 9 panelists that you can see on your screen. So I will get rid of that question. There's a question from David Rennie in Milton Keynes, who asks if you could unpack a little what you mean about modelling and capacity.
So what we did with and I think the main area that I can talk about where this has really developed successfully was North Kirklees. So it was, we had meetings beforehand, and I was just like, for example, I went to meet a vicar and an imam, and I said, I would really like it if you could become part of our church mosque twins. You are already doing the work on the ground, and you would be great role models within the country, across the area. And if you can help to build that up for you to have a national profile, that would be great. So what started from, and they were like, yeah, definitely, we're already doing it, we're already friends, and we're going to schools anyway, and and we would love to be part of this. So it just grew from there, and by their example, and then all of us coming together as North Kirklees Interfaith Council, it actually helped to get the other ones, like for example, David Curry then going back to Dewsbury and saying, I want to do something with Darul Ilm. And then there were other groups that went around, and there were other women's groups that joined. And last year, I didn't need to be as involved as I was the years before that, because the momentum has grown so much in North Kirklees that it's just doing it by itself without any really support from me anymore. I do attend like North Kirklees Interfaith Council, but on Interfaith Week, if I don't have the capacity to get across there during that week, I'm not really as much needed, because they've already seen how well everybody's coming together, the enthusiasm, the happiness, those images, the photographs that we take, how we then put it on social media. You can sort of step away and then concentrate on other areas to help that make that happen in other areas. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Kaneez. There's another question that's come in from Reynold Rosenberg in Welling and Hatfield Interfaith Group, who asks, do the faiths join together in the activity they're doing, or do they sort of do separate displays of that kind of thing during Interfaith Week?
Definitely together. The most important thing about what we've been doing has been everybody working together. And if that planning takes 6 months, it takes 6 months. If that planning takes 9 months, it takes 9 months. But there has to be equal buy-in, there has to be equal partnership in this. The value has to be given to everyone that's around that table, because if we do it separately, we're still not coming together. We're not building friendships, we're not building relationships, we're not actually trying to get to know each other on a different level than the one that we know what our norms are. So my norm, my area, what I've been brought up in is a Pakistani culture, and how we've lived, and to actually take myself out of the comfort zone, and I have a really close Jewish friend, and let's have conversations about Palestine, let's have conversations about, until we take ourselves out of our comfort zones to try to have these conversations. And that actually then deepens our friendship, because we've managed to get past the hurdle of, for example, talking about Palestine. So at least we are building that up, but it doesn't happen like within 6 months. It takes years to develop these relationships.
There's a couple more questions have come in. One is about, so it's from somebody anonymous, I'm not sure who that was, but it says the COVID-19 obviously throws up further practical difficulties for planning. How are groups in West Yorkshire dealing with that? What sort of things are they thinking through?
I think people are thinking about what they're going to do, whether it is going to be like Zoom calls and webinars. And we've just had the Great Joe Cox weekend, and a lot of that was done online, where people did Zoom calls and webinars. And also when we had the fasting month, and we couldn't get together to have iftars together, and so some of that was done online. But by the time that I hope by the time that Interfaith Week comes up, they should be able to have at least some form of gatherings, and then some of it online, a mixture of both. Like you could go on an Interfaith walk together during Interfaith Week, and it would be fine. It wouldn't be a challenge to arrange that. Brilliant,
thank you. And I think that probably also helps to answer a question that was very similar from Jeremy Rodell in Richmond Interfaith Group, which was, what sort of things are you thinking about, given that you might not be able to meet physically? But I think that more or less answers that question. Just having a quick read through as we go. I think while I'm doing that, Harriet, I think, wanted to make a point.
I think I'll make it after other people have raised any questions that they had. I don't want to cut across the webinar time.
There's a couple of these questions I think are more general, so I'm going to save them till at the end of the meeting.
Well, the point I wanted to make was that this is something which Kaneez herself wouldn't or couldn't say, but one reason we invited her to speak was not just because of the content of what she said, it was because she is a one-person example of the sheer energy that many of you bring to this week and to your work overall. She explained incredibly well, and as did Narendra before her, the important link between the week and the work that you do all the year round. And the passion and the commitment that exemplifies both Narendra and Kaneez and others who will speak, and many of you out there, really is what carries this work forward, and the week is an important part of that. So I was glad that Kaneez sort of tied that work into the work of the year as a whole. But she has been extremely dynamic with colleagues in using social media well. If you are a bit nervous about using Twitter or Facebook or other things, nobody has to be an instant expert. Many of you use it well already. If you don't yet, take a look at some of the things from last year, including some of the excellent tweets that came from Kaneez and colleagues, because I think it's very encouraging and very positive. But there's no substitute for human live contact. So it was lovely to hear about that too. Thanks for letting me comment, Ashley.
That's all right. And I think there was just one question there which I missed before, which was which social media channels do you use? That was from Karen in Redbridge. So it's Twitter and Facebook mainly. And a lot of my colleagues are using Instagram more and more and more. I'm a bit tired of trying to get it all out all the time. So I've made an Insta account, but I haven't started using it as much. And I suppose when we're going to develop our young people work, which we will be, Snapchat will definitely, and maybe TikTok might be the ones that will be coming in later on. Brilliant, thank you. And you've got a nice comment there from Jay Anderson in Leeds, who says Kaneez is an absolute blessing to West Yorkshire, and I'm glad to be able to call on her and call her my friend. Thank you, Jay. Nice way to finish that bit. So we'll move on to our next presentation now. Thank you very much, Kaneez. I don't think I can add more warm thanks than the ones you've had from Harriet and Jay. So I will introduce David Hampshire, who is my colleague at the Interfaith Network. He's our Assistant Director and has a background in RE and schools. and I will pass over to him to offer some ideas for things that are coming up.
Thank you very much, Ashley, and thank you, Kaneez. That was superb. As somebody from West Yorkshire, I felt really proud there, so thank you very much. As Narendra said at the beginning, Interfaith Week has been a rich experience since it started in 2009, and it's built and grown over time. If you want to find out see some of the great ideas that people have used over the last 11, 12 years, one place to have a look is the Interfaith Week website, and to look at the resources on there and the reports that have been published on each Interfaith Week with ideas for the future, and also the Interfaith Week toolkit. So I would suggest that, if you have some time, do have a look at the Interfaith Week website, have a look at the resources. Many of the activities that you will find there probably could happen this year, perhaps not in the same format, same way, but I think it is worth really having a look at. But I'd like to explore just some of the things that you might want to think about as we look forward to Interfaith Week 2020, with no doubt its challenges, but also its opportunities. I think one of the interesting things looking back at Interfaith Week is where people have held events where they explore issues of interest and concern. Things like public meetings where Kaneez mentioned about Palestine, Israel, things that really people are interested in and want to talk about. Well, those things are still possible. Given social distancing, given the space that you have, that might happen in a real space, or it could happen in a virtual space. And increasingly, local interfaith groups are doing things like webinars. So a good example would be Barking and Dagenham Faith Forum. They've held a really interesting webinar on mental health. And recently, the Newcastle Council of Faiths has been exploring racism in the light of events nationally and internationally. So the opportunity to hold things like webinars, to get really good quality speakers in and to get people to listen, I think is really good. And the great thing about things like Zoom and other platforms is that you can actually invite people in from a great distance that otherwise you may never be able to get to your event. So that produces a real exciting opportunity. There are many things that do happen during Interfaith Week. Kaneez mentioned walks, and certainly the whole thing of interfaith cycle rides, that's one of the things that's happened in the past, and visiting places of worship may be more difficult, but certainly it is possible to do virtual tours. And I'm not going to dwell on that, because I know Penny's going to tell us about the wonderful things that have been going on in Oxford and how it's to do. And I heard some absolutely fantastic things about how Oxford raised to the challenge of the lockdown for the Interfaith Friendship Walk. So I'm looking forward to that. Many of you will work with schools, and in the past you may have been into schools, given talks to classes, perhaps spoke at assemblies. That may be more challenging, as we know that there are conferences, not until October will conferences be allowed because of social distancing. What will happen in November, we're not so sure. So one way of doing that with schools is through video links. And it is possible to set up a panel like this and then to actually have that go into a school, into a class, where people get the opportunity to talk about their own faith and about the interfaith activities that they themselves take part in, which is a really important witness, and I'll come on to that in a moment. What I would say though, and I think this is could be a bit of a challenge, is if you're used to going into one classroom to speak to a class, if the school is part of a multi-academy trust, somebody might think, well, actually they could do 18 classes in 18 different schools all at the same time. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And actually, if you don't think about what's happening out there, it might not be so daunting. But if you want people to ask questions, then actually managing that could be really difficult. So if you are going to do an online panel or a video link panel, and you want questions, get teachers to get pupils to think about questions before the event and email those in, because actually responding to what's in the Q&A can really unsettle people. And what you don't want is long pauses and people thinking, I have no idea I have no answer to that. So it's better to be slightly in control. And the other thing I would mention as well, which I do think is quite important, is we're on Zoom. And I've heard people talk about zoomed out because there's so many Zoom meetings. How can I manage? But actually, not all local authorities will allow their schools to use Zoom. They use other platforms instead, like Microsoft Teams, or there are various different platforms. So if you're planning on it, it's really important to talk to the school or to the Multi-Academy Trust or somebody in the local authority about what can schools use so we can prepare ourselves. And that's particularly because if you're used to using one format, changing to another format, it may look similar, but suddenly you don't know where any of the buttons are. So to work yourself around the process, I think, is really important. And that's where dry runs become really important, I think. You know, test it out first. Make sure that you're comfortable with the system and that it all works well. There are other things, of course, you can do as well. In the past, there have been things like arts and poetry competitions for schools, and Westminster Faith Exchange has an example of that on their website. We'll send these links out later for people to have a look at. So there are other things you can do, and I know Building Bridges Pendle has been running a poetry competition over the summer via things like Instagram as a local group. So if you're into competition mode, that might be something that you also might want to investigate. Another thing that I think is useful, and Kaneez alluded to this already, I'm not just using you, Kaneez, as the total source of what I'm saying, but it's been very helpful. One of the things that I find quite interesting is sometimes when I'm in the IFN office or here in the utility room in my house, which is doubling as an office at the moment, people phone up from local authorities and say, is there anybody doing interfaith in our area? Because we don't know of anybody. And I'm thinking, well, that's funny because I know. So the question is, why don't people know? And I think one of the things that we don't do well enough necessarily is tell our story. And I think Interfaith Week is a brilliant opportunity to be able to tell the story so far. I mean, it's interesting, Hounslow Friends of Faith this year will be marking 20 years of their existence. What a story they have to tell. They're putting a short history together to let people know. And I think that that's something that could be done. You could put something on your website about your story. You could do a little video about your story. You can talk to some of the founding members. Look at some of the newer members and get something communicated about the really important things you're doing. Because I think very often we're so immersed in what we're doing that actually we forget to tell the story, and that really needs to be done. And I think that that's something that actually can be quite useful when working with statutory bodies, such as local authorities, public health, the police, other local authorities, because I think there's an opportunity here to tell our story about what we do to people who actually really need to know what we do. I think COVID-19 has shown the tremendous cultural and social capital that faith communities and interfaith groups actually bring to our nation. I know that there are some case studies being done at the moment looking at how local groups have actually responded across 42 areas of England and Wales and Northern Ireland to the situation as has developed. Well, actually, it may be time now to partner and say, actually, if you look at the structures that are developing around COVID-19, we need to be able to partner with somebody to tell them about what we do and what we offer. And I think that can be immensely beneficial. I remember one of the best things I probably did when I was in Cornwall during Interfaith Week, as part of the Cornwall Faith Forum, was a seminar for hospice workers who had all sorts of questions about how do they deal with people of difference in those crucial times leading to death, and what do they do then? And they were really welcome, but they didn't know that any of these groups existed. So telling that story and partnering with bodies, statutory bodies, to do an event may be really useful. And this has happened in the past, so there's no reason why it can't happen at the moment. Moving away from that, there may be other things that you might like to do. One of the things that has blossomed I think, during COVID-19 lockdown are things like online reflection and online prayers. So at the last local interfaith webinar, the Brighton and Hove Interfaith Contact Group spoke about this. In fact, you can see that webinar online. It's on our website if you want to go back and have a look and see what they had to say. Of course, not all interfaith groups have a website. Not all have a YouTube channel, but most do have something like a Facebook or a Twitter, and I'm looking forward to seeing more on Instagram, and I'll be particularly intrigued to see more on TikTok and the form that that would take. But I think what's interesting here for me is that opportunity to put things out into the public sphere under the name of the local interfaith group, which may have a prayer or a reflection on each day of local interfaith week. I think that's an opportunity there that can really be exploited over time. And that brings me on to something else as well, and Richard's going to be mentioning. I know Yogesh is also talking about some of the physical and virtual considerations that we need to think about. And I know that Richard's going to be speaking a little bit about a video project that they're doing. But actually, video messaging can also be really good during Interfaith Week. Last year, the Interfaith Network did a series of talking heads. They're only a few minutes long. We had somebody who was saying who they were, what their interfaith project was. It's about 2 minutes long, and it was all done on mobile phones with a little bit of editing, produced a really valuable resource for actually getting those messages out. And it could be that in the lead up to Interfaith Week, you could do a series of 8 of those, one to go out on each day, perhaps on different themes. Of course, remember Sunday is the first day of Interfaith Week, so you could do something around Remembrance the first week. And interestingly, for those who may be partnering with things like Mitzvah Day, because Mitzvah Day falls on the last day of Interfaith Week, you could finish off with an Interfaith Mitzvah Day reflection at the end. So there's that opportunity to be able to use video messaging during Interfaith Week and to plan that well in advance. And if you do want help, certainly in terms of the technical stuff around Twitter, around Facebook, Ashley, myself, others in Interfaith Network are more than happy to discuss and to help you along that road. So I've probably spoken too much. Ashley, you're nodding. So I'll stop speaking now. And if there are any questions, please feel free.
Thank you, David, for that tour de force of possibilities, things that people might do this year. We have had some questions come through, sort of linked specifically to that. One is from Dee Boyle in York. She says they were considering running a competition for poetry, photos and paintings to encourage local schools to take part, but they are worried that staff and pupils might be overloaded at the moment trying to catch up on normal schoolwork. So she asks, is this the right time to be trying to think about something like this, or is this something maybe we should put off till next year?
I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, what I would do is I would actually talk to the schools that you're thinking of doing this with and see what they themselves think. I think there's a tremendous anxiety. If you read the education press, there's a tremendous anxiety about return to school in the autumn and the narrowing of the curriculum and the exclusion of things like art, the exclusion of things like RE, to focus on what seems sometimes to be the more important things around the accountability measure. And this might be a great opportunity to say, look, here's something that you could do that's different, and it might break that, not the spell of those subjects, but it may be an opportunity. But I would talk to the schools first, sound teachers out, and I think that you get a much better sense of what's going on in your locality. You may find that some schools will be fine with that, other schools not so much. So I do think it's talking to people locally is really important.
Brilliant, thank you, David. And there's another question here or a sort of comment question from Eric Hyam, who says he would like to see more opportunities for interfaith groups to volunteer together, including things like food banks, homelessness shelters, etc. Lots of faith communities do these things in a very vibrant way. separately, but are there examples of groups doing that together? Now, you mentioned Mitzvah Day, David, which is one example of that.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, across the country, it works out in slightly different ways. I think you're right. In some areas, particular faith groups have become associated with particular types of program or particular type of outreach, such as they do the food bank and somebody else does something else. I think actually what's really interesting, there's some interesting examples across the country about cooperation around rough sleepers in winter. And I think, you know, who knows what autumn will bring in terms of the weather, but certainly different places of worship sharing their spaces and rotating rough sleepers around has been really interesting. So there are examples, and I think very often when people think, I have a good idea, so let's do it, what they don't actually think is if they can do it, to broaden that net. So I think people are really open to saying, actually, you're doing this, we'd really love to be involved. Is there a role that we can play? So I certainly think there are opportunities, and perhaps Interfaith Week is a good springboard for that opportunity.
Thank you. And there's a comment from Bristol Multi-Faith Forum here, which among a few suggestions, says that one really good way to promote the message of interfaith through social media would be a Zoom conference. So that's something that both we and other groups might think about in the lead up to Interfaith Week. Yeah. And they've had examples of running kind of in-person conferences in the past very successfully on different issues. So I'm now going to move on. Thank you very much, David, for that.
Great pleasure.
It's very helpful. There are a couple more questions hanging, which I haven't forgotten about, but I am going to bring in at the end because there's some more general points there. Our next speaker is Yogesh Joshi, who is Vice Chair of Watford Interfaith Association. And I'm going to invite him now to offer some reflections. Yogesh.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I'm here mainly to share about the physical and virtual aspects of the Interfaith Week. But before I do that, actually, I'll just quickly whiz through what we have been doing since the lockdown, at least, which will sort of give a kind of a background to what our thinking is, at least how we are planning for the Interfaith Week itself as well. So since the lockdown started on 23rd of March, in April and May, we every week organize every Tuesday evening at 8:30 organized prayer meetings. So again, through Watford Interfaith Association, people came together and offered prayers from different faiths, different religions, different beliefs. So that continued very well. And then as the lockdown eased up, we thought, obviously, should we continue with the prayer meetings or do something at least? As people found it useful, we have turned into a kind of a discussion meeting at least. So we choose a topic of interest. And then from May, June, and even now, we are continuing every Tuesday night with a discussion on a topic and bringing in different viewpoints from different faiths and beliefs. One of the things Watford Interfaith also is involved with is Watford celebration, which normally would happen in one of the bank holidays, either the first or the last bank holiday in May. Because of the lockdown, that could not happen this year, and we were in a dilemma what we would do. So finally, we agreed on a format, and we are going to actually, rather than missing out completely, we have organized Watford Celebration, which is a kind of a bringing together of the diversity, rich diversity and the cultures and the faiths of Watford. And that is going to happen at the August bank holiday weekend. So over the 3 days, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, we are going to have kind of more or less virtual celebration of Watford and its rich diversity and cultures. So on a Saturday and a Monday, there'll be kind of more Zoom packaged video clips of different sort of items, which will be, people are actually at the moment being invited to contribute. After that, on Sunday, we are specifically, one of the key aspects we discuss is the sacred space topic we have chosen, and there'll be a discussion again from different faiths actually coming to that. So these are the kind of things which are happening. And then last meeting, we had our committee meeting on 11th July. That's when we first kind of paid attention to how we will organize Interfaith Week. And some of the aspects, obviously, we discussed actually what places of worship are open, what are the limitations, what we could do. Because normally when we organize the Interfaith pilgrimage, which is a local pilgrimage, we start at Watford synagogue, which actually coincides with the bar mitzvah days. So we obviously combine that, actually we start that, which is away from the town center, and then these are all local walks actually, so we have to walk, and so we walk from that synagogue, come towards the town, and then we visit the Anglican Church, St. Mary's Church, Holy Rood Church, Catholic Church, two mosques, Shia and the Sunni mosque, and finally we end up at the Gurudwara. So that roughly lasts from about 12:30 till about 5:30, 6 o'clock. And that is the Sunday afternoon. So that was done actually since the Interfaith Week started for last 10 years. We have been doing that every year, and the numbers have been 80, 90, approaching 100. So the dilemma was obviously with the limitations on these spaces, that would be difficult for us to do. And again, we checked actually, and the numbers are actually at St. Michael's Church, they allow 40 people on Sundays. Quaker Meeting House, they allow 15 people at the moment, socially distanced. A mosque allows up to 30 people, but you have to make a booking because obviously the demand is high. And Holy Rood Church allows on a Sunday 40 people. So we thought, what would we do at least, okay? And then the ideas we've been discussing, and again, we found out about this webinar taking place as well. So we thought, okay, we'll attend and take some good ideas to take back and then develop further. So what we are thinking at the moment is actually possibly have a virtual visit whereby for all through the Interfaith Week, from Sunday to Sunday, we could have a virtual, at the moment actually on some days, a virtual visit of a place of worship. And that is going to allow actually, because obviously that is a local pilgrimage, we have stuck to the local places of worship in the town center. But this will probably allow us actually to include more places of worship like St. Albans Abbey, Amravati Buddhist Center, which is in Hemel Hempstead, Bhakti Vedanta Manor, also known as Hare Krishna Temple, and a Jain temple in Bushi. So what we are thinking actually that on every night of the Interfaith Week, we could obviously request a person from a place of worship to do a little presentation tell about the faith and the actual place of worship, give us the guidance, and then have a Q&A and a discussion about that particular faith and general usage. So these are the kind of things we are thinking, and we may possibly, depending upon where there are greater numbers, and it could well be a church, because obviously churches are big, and then bigger number could be allowed at least. So then maybe on one night, over the weekend, possibly end up having the actual sort of pilgrimage meeting, at least in a place of worship. So these are the kind of ideas we are developing at the moment. And hopefully some others you could probably take some of these on and at least make sure that we all come together to celebrate the National Interfaith Week.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Yogesh. Some great ideas there. Just having a look at questions. If anyone's got questions for Yogesh, please send them in. There's one or two here that I think are more general. One, I think picking up on the suggestion before of a conference from Ashwin Soni in Crawley, says he likes the idea of doing a joint national conference or meeting online.
Ashley, could
Harriet, yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to offer a more general point, because I think what's really helpful about a number of points made so far, particularly those that you've just made, Yogesh, is that a lot of groups, and this includes faith groups and other types of organisations too, are really wrestling with whether they should do things physically or virtually. And none of us have a crystal ball. You know, we don't know what it's going to look like in November. So there's this kind of deep worry that you'll put a lot of time into something and it'll be the wrong thing. I don't think there is a wrong thing. And I just wanted to say, I think that whatever people prepare, if it's virtual, if you find you can go out on the day, that's wonderful. But the virtual capturing of things through online tours and visits, this is a fantastic archive, a wonderful thing to have available for your website. So that this is a plus come what. But because of the age demographic of quite a number of groups, and also the BAME higher incidence, level of infection and death level, there are particular concerns for many local interfaith groups, just as there are for some faith communities. So being safe rather than sorry is a big thing, I think. And I know that this has been touched on earlier, but I would want to just draw attention again to the government's guidelines, even though they may sometimes be somewhat complex to follow, and they differ from nation to nation in terms of lockdown easing. Whatever is in place needs to be observed, but that doesn't mean to say one can't plan for two sorts of things in parallel. You can have online events and then have a small scale get together, properly distanced, close to the time if that's wanted. So I don't know whether Ashley, whether Yogesh had any other reflections on that, but I did find his background very, very helpful in terms of thinking about that sort of the tension between what people might do.
Indeed, I mean, what the discussions we have been having so far, at least within the sort of a committee of Watford Interfaith Association, is that some people obviously are still isolating because of the age or other situations, at least, and at least having remote virtual meetings, they are at least still finding comforting to be sort of able to be in the contact, at least, with sort of people of different faiths and beliefs. So that's the reason we at least decided that we definitely want to do something. And rather than actually people afraid of at least coming out of the house, actually getting in contact and whatnot, and again, not knowing what the situation is, at least we are planning something what would be achievable. And obviously, if you're going to actually request places of worship, at least to provide a virtual tour of some kind, to allow them time to prepare for us as well as a presentation to us, whether it be a PowerPoint presentation or a short video clip or whatever, which we'll have to work with them. So that's the kind of planning which will go on between now and November. So that's why we are putting all these thoughts, at least, as that we will at least carry on planning on most of the activities, unfortunately on a virtual basis. But if things improve, then it would not stop us actually, easily to turn it into a kind of a visit in person, at least if not all the places of worship we visit regularly or normally on an annual basis, at least one or two places actually, because luckily we are fortunate enough in Watford that the places of worship I mentioned, they are all in a close vicinity, very short walking distances from each other in the town centre. So that is our sort of real benefit, that we could at short notice. And again, over the last 10 years, we have actually found that all the places of worship are accommodating and welcoming, at least, so at a short notice, they will be able to at least allow us in person if that was possible, at least. So while that is in the sort of a backup plan, our main planning is sort of organizing things virtually. And instead of actually just concentrating on one Sunday afternoon, this year we will end up doing it over the 7-day period, at least complete 7-day period.
Thank you, Yogesh. And there's one very quick question to you from Reynold Rosenberg in Welling, Hatfield, just asking which of the places of worship in Watford are already open.
Yes, there is obviously a complete list of information on the Watford Interfaith website and Facebook, but the churches are, as I mentioned, they are open. The mosque is open. Hare Krishna Temple, Bhaktivedanta Manor, that is open. But some places actually are operating a booking systems. You can't just turn up. They obviously want to control and manage number of people visiting. So you have to make online booking before you can go and visit. But at least the churches, because of the bigger space which allows, I think it's easy to visit the churches regularly sort of without booking, like St. Michael's Church or the Holy Rood Church, which are in the town center. St. Mary's Church, and also the mosque as well, as I mentioned. But mosque will require a booking, as well as the Jain temple, you have to make a booking as well, at least. So while they are open, you need booking in some places, and some, at least churches, you can turn up, yes.
Great, thank you, Yogesh. And we are now going to move on to our next presenter, who is Penny Faust. Penny is a member and a former chair of Oxford Council of Faiths. She's also chair of the annual Oxford Interfaith Friendship Walk, co-president of the Oxford Jewish Congregation, and a former broadcaster. So Penny, welcome, and over to you.
Hello to everybody. I'm going to make this a really practical session on how to organise a virtual interfaith walk. Now, let me just give you some background. The annual Oxford Interfaith Friendship Walk has been going on this year, was the 16th year. So we have an established position where the Council of Faiths, it was initially run with a very small group of people from the Abrahamic faiths, and then grew, it was taken over by the Council of Faiths when the organiser wanted to give up. And it's now, the Council of Faiths has 27 members. So we have a rich variety of people in Oxford. The Friendship Walk Committee is a kind of subgroup of the Council of Faiths, and it obviously has the regulars, and then we can call upon quite a lot of people from across the Friendship Walk Committee to help when we actually have the walk. And we get, when we have the walk, anything up to 500 people. We leave from the synagogue, we go to, if you know Oxford, we go to St Giles Church, then to the University Church, and then to the Central Mosque on Cowley Road. We have reflections at each stop from various faith leaders, not necessarily the faith of the venue, and we have drinks and small light refreshments on the way. And then when we get to the mosque, there's a meal offered by the a lot of mosques in Oxford join together to provide a meal, and all the desserts are made by the Oxford Jewish congregation. So it's a really good example of multi-faith working across the city. So this year we get to the stage where we obviously can't have the walk. We called it off in March when it came to lockdown because we realised that it wasn't going to be viable. And I suppose about a month before it was due to happen, it always happens sometime in June. This is obviously varied because of Ramadan. And somewhere about 2 weeks before the actual walk was due to happen, we'd been having prayer meetings organised by Imam Monawar Hussain from the Oxford Foundation. And we'd been having them about every 3 weeks. And way back, I'd said, oh, we could have a prayer meeting based on the Friendship Walk, and everyone fell about laughing, and we left it at that. And then about 2 weeks before it should have happened, somebody else came back and said, why don't we have a virtual faith walk? And we put the two things together. We didn't actually manage to have it on the day when it should have happened, but we had it a week later because we just needed the extra time to organise ourselves. And I'm going to tell you how we did it, because this, as I said, is actually designed to be a very practical session. So first of all, fix your date and time. And if you happen to know about walks in your area and you do them anyway, like the pilgrimage walk in Watford, use the people who you've had before, who know about the walk and who've taken on roles probably in the ordinary friendship walk. Most importantly, find someone who can handle the technology. Imam Monawar Hussain, as I said, had been running prayer meetings beforehand, and he volunteered or was asked if he would mind doing it. And what we did was that we ran it on exactly the same lines as we did the ordinary walk. So we always used to start at the synagogue with input and then go to St Giles Church. And what we did was ask contributors, who some of whom had done it before and some of whom who hadn't, to actually give their inputs live. And the bits where we would otherwise have been walking, we used videos and photographs from previous walks, of which we have a multitude. And you'd be surprised what you can find if you ask your faith communities, because even if you don't keep an official photographic or video record of your walk, you'll find that quite a lot of people in your faith groups have been taking pictures over the years. And we used music. Some of it was actually sung live when we were actually doing the virtual walk, and some of it were recordings from choirs that were part of the faith venues that we would normally go to. So live contributors using Zoom combined with pre-recorded intervals, and they were all uploaded onto a Facebook page from the Oxford Foundation and a website, and you could watch it live. Right. Decide whether you're going to let it go out live or not. You don't have to do it live. It adds a certain kind of frisson of anxiety. And people said, oh, I hope it's not too shambolic. And I said, oh, come on, the walk's fairly shambolic anyway. So we really don't need to worry about the fact that it may not be. That, you know, one of the problems is that all the stuff we see on television is perfect. It's run by whichever commercial organisation or the BBC does it, and they're very careful to make sure that it isn't shambolic. But one of the joys of doing something in your own area is it doesn't really matter as long as the goodwill is there. And that's the way that we operated. So, as I say, decide whether you're going to go out live or not. And as I said, we use live contributors, and we limited it to 2 contributors, though when we have the walk, it can be more than 2 contributors. We limited it to 2 contributors per venue. And that was quite deliberate. We decided that 30 to 45 minutes is about as long as people really want to watch something on the screen. So we were quite, once you've decided what your timings want to do, is what you're going to do, you decide how long your contributors should be speaking for. No nonsense. Find a producer or editor. If there happens to be somebody in your group that knows about either producing or editing, use them. And they can kind of deflect any anxiety away from the contributors. When the contributors have written something, I happen to do that, take on that role for this walk. Every script that came in was too long. Tell your contributors that they must read out loud what they're going to say and time it for themselves. Then they send it in to whoever your producer or editor is. That person reads it out loud. If it's over time, you give your contributor a choice. Either you edit it or I edit it. If I edit it, it might not have the bit in that you want. So you edit it and you reread it for yourself, and you make sure that it's within, we said 2.5 to 3 minutes, 2.5 preferably. We might just let you go on for 3 minutes if necessary. So get your timing right, plan the walk. We used our usual route. Choose your contributors. Maybe the contributors you've used on your walk on a regular basis, maybe new people. But it's really important, first of all, that those people are acceptable to the different faith groups. So maybe you should ask them to put up contributors. But the one thing that the contributors must not be is camera shy. And you'd be surprised how many people actually are camera shy, which is why they hate Zoom meetings. But what you want to do is not have somebody actually on the screen who looks as if they're really nervous. You want to have people who are relaxed and who are enjoying what they're doing. They can really say whatever they want. If you're using people who have been contributors in the past, they'll know the kind of things to say on a walk. If you're using new people, you may need to actually talk to them whether they want to give a prayer, in which case we've always hoped that people will make prayers as universal as possible without compromising their own faith. And that can be quite sensitive. It might mean explaining to a Christian that if they say, and you don't have to make, they have to make the decision for themselves, but Kaneez talked about difficult decisions. You might find it necessary to say, look, if you say through Jesus Christ our Lord, not everyone is going to say amen. If you can take that bit off, then everybody will be able to say amen. And that's the kind of thing which you can find quite difficult to say. Now, sometimes we've had contributors over the last 16 years who've said, no, that will compromise my faith if I say that. And then we have to say, well, you can decide to use that ending on your or those words as part of it. I mean, I'm not just talking about Christians, but then you're not going to necessarily carry everybody with
Penny,
you.
you've got one minute remaining.
You need to make sure that there's somebody who takes responsibility for finding the videos or photographs that you're going to put into the interval. You've got to have the person who really knows how to twiddle the knobs to put that bit together. And my last thing is to say, have a full dress rehearsal at least 3 days beforehand, because that way you know who's going to put stuff back into whatever their contribution is going to be, and you can take it out again, or the person who's twiddling the knobs can find out what the glitches are. And if you want to, you can record it and put it on your website.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Penny. I think that's given me certainly a huge amount to think about, and I hope it's been useful for others. I know there were a couple of questions that came in earlier on in the webinar that were about how do we think about doing interfaith walks. I deliberately didn't bring them up because I knew you were going to do this, and you've covered the practicalities excellently, so thank you very much. I'm going to move straight on to our next speaker. We are slightly tight on time, which is the Reverend Richard Martin, who is Chair of North Kent Interfaith Relations Council. So pass over to you, Richard.
Now you can hear me, I hope. Good. Well, thank you so much to everybody else. It's been really inspiring to hear what's been going on and the suggestions that have been made. I've just got one very simple suggestion to make, one thing that we've decided to do. Before I proceed with that, I'd just love to say to Kaneez that I was a member of the North Kirklees Interfaith Council over 20 years ago, and I'm really pleased to hear it's going strong. I was living in Batley Car at the time, if you've heard of that. So we had a interfaith walk annually, which we've been building up. Last year for the first time included litter picking, because we wanted to say this is for the benefit of the community as well as just for getting us together. We decided quite early on that that probably wasn't going to happen, and so rather than have a load of uncertainty about what we could do, we decided to go straight down the line of doing something online. And so this year what we've planned to do, after a lot of discussion, is through having Zoom council meetings, is to have a video produced by a professional who one of our members fortunately knows and is willing to offer his services for nothing, on the theme of hope, generally within each faith community and its theology, but particularly focused on the coronavirus, of course. What is the hope we can offer during this situation to other people, and to what is being offered amongst ourselves within our faith groups? So we have begun to ask this filmmaker to meet with us. I met with him today and recorded my little bit, and we will be meeting on Zoom again on Monday to see who else has done that with him. And what he said to me today is it would be really nice if we could get, rather than him touring around the different places of worship and doing one at each place, for us all to get together in one place and be interviewed. So it's going to be a bit like the Talking Heads thing that was mentioned not long ago. So obviously this has got to be edited and make sure it looks good. So the deadline, as it were, for getting all the core material in is the middle of September, and then we've got October to get it sorted out so it's ready to go up on the website in good time for Interfaith Week. So it's a simple idea. It depended very much on having this person of expertise, but having found him, we thought this was a good opportunity to do something different. Just while I've got the floor, so to speak, one other thing that was suggested was virtual tours of places of worship. Our local Sikh Gurdwara has got a brilliant one, but the rest of us aren't quite that far advanced technologically. So it's an aspiration for us to put other virtual tours on our website. but that also seemed to be a good idea. I remember when I was teaching, we used to go on virtual tours of various places of worship, and they were very helpful. So that's really all I want to say, is just one idea of something that is definitely doable, rather than thinking, well, maybe not, and it end up doing possibly not very much at all. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. And I think the point you made right at the end there about with reference to the Gurdwara is really important, which is using things you already have. If a church or a mosque or a temple in your local community already has a virtual tour on its website for educational purposes or for tourism purposes, then why not highlight it during the week? That's a really good thing. It doesn't have to be a new creation. We've had one question come in, which is for you, which is, what is the cost of producing the video? I think you mentioned your technical person was free of charge. Is that right?
Yeah, he's a filmmaker and he's offered his services for nothing. So I don't know what it would be if we had to pay him quite a lot, I should think.
That was from Paul Samuels in Windsor and Maidenhead. And I think there's quite a few general questions that I've been keeping back. So I'll put some of those to all of you, and any of you can chip in on these. One was quite an important question, actually, from Ida Moller, who is from Religions for Peace Youth Network. She says, not everyone is able to take part in virtual events. Some people don't have the technology or don't even have access to the internet. So are there ways to make sure that those people can be reached as well? Anyone got any thoughts on that? Penny?
I know that there were some people who are in exactly that position who are very active members of the walk committee, who actually did take themselves off to walk at exactly the same time as we were running the virtual walk. Now, obviously they were slower than the virtual walk was, but they felt very much, and they did it independently, and I know that they didn't meet up on the way, so they must have all started at slightly different times. And I think they found it very satisfactory to feel that they were still walking, and they said, made their own reflections at each place as they went.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Yogesh?
Okay, just to basically share something which may happen in Watford is the celebration event we are going to have. Again, not everybody is technology savvy or obviously don't have access even or whatever. So some of the meetings actually which we have been having, we have actually good local elected mayor as well as the MP. They have been taking part in some of these meetings we have been having. And as part of planning for the celebration event, our Watford mayor, as of normally during the summer, about this time actually, end of July, in Watford town centre in the parade area, there'll be a big screen put up actually to show films. That's not going to happen this year. But for the purpose of the celebration event, actually, what the mayor offered, actually, after chatting with the council officials, actually, that a screen could be put up in the Castlebury Park, which is big enough. A social distance could be maintained at least, and then people could be brought there or could make their way. And obviously, they could obviously watch the event that way as well, actually. So if you have a local council which is on board with what we are trying to do, then maybe they could help with such things at least, you know, and then obviously our local taxpayer kind of money going towards the kind of benefit of the whole community as well in some way at least. So that may happen at least for celebration, and then we may actually, if it works actually, then take up for the interfaith sort of pilgrimage as well as this. Yes.
Thank you, Yogesh. That's a really helpful suggestion, and there's a very similar one that's just come through on the Q&A from Ingrid Wilson in Newport, who says some members of her local church went to a friend's garden in order to take part in a Zoom service. So you had somebody sort of, you know, showing it near the door, I guess, and then people able to socially distantly take part in that. Kaneez, did you want to come in on this one? I saw you nodding. No. Okay.
Can I just say, actually, there is, also, this is not a kind of end reflection, but coming back to Hounslow, who were mentioned earlier by David, this is a really good example of things not all being virtual. They have a knitting group, Now the knitting group can, I don't know if it knits distantly or how it does it during lockdown, but they are actually, the people who are in that knitting group are busy knitting a special banner for their 20th anniversary for Interfaith Week. And I imagine the banner will be put in places not just online, but the knitting is going on online. And I don't know, and it'll be interesting to see how the assembling, the knitting and the putting together all works. Because people often do projects together, embroidery, knitting, lots of groups do things which are kind of assembling different items. So it may be that there are different ways for people to be involved and different opportunities, small groups, even people in their bubbles, if these strange things still exist at that time. There are opportunities for people to come together. And I know in Bradford, for example, and Kaneez will be very familiar with the work of Touchstone, that I mean, I think it might just be worth referring to how some of those groups work, because it is possible to have really exciting things happening out with, you know, it's, I mean, those are smaller groups, I think, aren't they, often?
They've been meeting online every week, have Touchstone, and they have done a creative project together during lockdown, where they've, I'm not sure, I think they've made like a banner together over lockdown, and they've been doing that every single week, and they've had somebody teach them how to do it online. But they've also like celebrated birthdays online and things, and had other conversations online too through Zoom. I was just agreeing about the fact that meeting in gardens, going on a walk, out in the public space, it depends what it's going to be like come Interfaith Week, if we're all back in a second lockdown or if we're not. If we are back in a second lockdown, it will be difficult to meet outside really, and most things will be like online, maybe phone calls, text messages, I'm not sure, WhatsApp groups, things like that.
That's great, thank you, very helpful. David.
Quickly unmute myself. So two of the things come to mind in terms of people with sort of the digital deficit, as it's sometimes called, or digital poverty. One thing that you can do, of course, is for a lot of events like Zoom and others, people can phone in and they can listen, or they can contribute over the telephone. That's another way of doing it. It's not ideal, but it is a way to be able to participate. The other thing is quite a number of faith groups over the lockdown period have been using things like particular sorts of radio stations like Mix LR and others, where they can actually broadcast what they're doing onto the radio. And that's another thing which is worth exploring. And of course, the other thing is, if you had something that you wanted to do more broadly to involve people, BBC local radio particularly have been very interested in putting things out across their networks. And I think that's another thing in terms of partnership. Local radio could be really useful at this time.
Thank you, David. I'm just going to feed in one or two of the things from comments just before we start to wrap up this final bit of the session. One was a comment from Dee Boyle in York, who says they're working on an interfaith inter-lockdown quilt that can be kept as a record of how faiths have been coping during the pandemic. So it's a really interesting idea that picks up on some of the others we've heard. Another comment from Cynthia Bailey, which came in earlier. Cynthia's in Wellingborough. She says schools have actually, one school's been in touch with the Wellingborough Interfaith group, asking it to run a workshop in November. So they were surprised to hear that, but they were also pleased to hear they weren't ruling it out because of the workload. That picks up on something from earlier there. And also another comment from Dee in York saying one way to do a video might be to ask a local college or university if it has a department where there are students that do coursework and so on video creation, video editing. I think that probably is all we have time for in terms of questions. Penny, do you want to quickly come in?
Yes, I was going to say that places of worship actually have quite large spaces, and they sometimes even have car parks. So people, they can go to a group that is social distancing in a place of worship that has a large space. And things like, one of the things that we have is an online knitting group, but we're hoping that once the synagogue is reopened, they will indeed be able to do that in a space in the synagogue. I mean, it's a very inoffensive way of actually getting together, and it is relatively safe because you can do all the social distancing and airing of the building and everything else that's in place for coming back into action anyway. And it does give people the opportunity of really meeting together when it's pouring with rain outside.
Wonderful. Thank you, Penny. Kaneez, and then we're going to move into our closing reflection slot.
Just like to follow up on Touchstone. So Touchstone have been making a Toran, which is a traditional South Asian wall hanging, and they've celebrated birthdays together. They've also the genocide of Srebrenica as well. They've done some things online with that. They've had a book group. So they've just continued to meet, but it's all been over Zoom. It has been over Zoom. It has been online.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kaneez. We have 5 minutes left of our advertised time. I expect we will go over by 3 or 4 minutes, which is probably okay. But I'm going to pass over, please, to Ed Petersen for some closing reflections. Ed is the chair of the Northern Ireland Interfaith Forum. Ed.
Good. Thanks, Ashley. And yeah, we're just really grateful for the webinar today. And particularly just for this week in general to as a motivation, certainly for ourselves over here in Northern Ireland. It's a great blessing to have that inspiration to really focus on that time together. And I've been jotting down a lot of notes from all the contributors. So we'll have our work cut out for us to try to squeeze in as much of the great suggestions that have been made, and I've found it really useful. And I think that was the whole point of today. So like I said, I think for us here, that this year in particular, I think gives us some new, really exciting new possibilities that we maybe never had considered before, particularly on the virtual side, and that's exciting in a way. And sometimes it's just the way the spirit is moving this year for each of us in our own context. So I think, like I said, we will do our best to follow all the inspiration that we've already heard. I don't know if it was David or yourself, Ashley, mentioned about the toolkit and the website with the great ideas that are already there. So there's no need to reinvent things, but there are so many great things in place already for us to follow up on. The one thing I wanted to mention from ourselves in Northern Ireland, we've had a lovely partnership with the Council of Christians and Jews in particular here, and also with the Belfast Islamic Center during this week. And I just want to credit particularly the Imam in the Islamic Center and the Rabbi in our Belfast Jewish community for the witness of their friendship together, particularly during that week in which for us here in Northern Ireland, sometimes we have our challenges on the Christian unity side, and they've made a tremendous contribution to our interfaith celebrations during that week. So I just wanted to credit them and say how looking forward we are to November.
Wonderful, thank you, Ed. And over to Harriet to have almost the last word. Harriet.
Well, it's been really fascinating to hear all the different ideas and also to see the questions, which have been very important ones. If I may, I'm just going to pick up a couple of the things from the questions. One was, why on earth do we have the week at this time of year? It's so cold. Yes, it is. Originally, we consulted very carefully, including the schools and universities, and they felt that this was actually the best time. And it's got its drawbacks, especially when you with the current situation. But we also time it to begin on Remembrance Sunday. And that is because the week begins with remembering together, for those who wish to, the service of people of different backgrounds, of all faiths and different beliefs. So I would encourage you also to think about how you might join in some way, if either to mark remembrance in that way, or some groups choose to have something focusing on peace. I'd also like to pick up a question about the bigger and smaller worlds, which goes back to something Narendra said at the beginning, and I think Canon John Hall, Dr. Hall from Exeter has picked up this is a time when we can look outwards as well as inwards, as it were, both within the UK and globally. The focus is the UK, and Scottish Interfaith Week alongside Interfaith Week, the focus is here, but many people look at global themes, and it couldn't be more important now, really, when you think about all the different things that are facing us right now. So the bigger and the smaller connect. Somebody has asked about guidance on the week, I think, and we may look at a little bit more guidance on that, but people hold their events independently and we offer thoughts and suggestions, but it's fairly light touch. The last thing that I wanted to come to was about the fact that this today has been something for interfaith organisations, local interfaith, national, regional. It hasn't picked up very specific and important constituencies like youth organisations or youth interfaith initiatives, or particular constituencies like local authorities, and so forth. And we are looking at other ways of engaging. And so if you feel that there are areas missing or things that you'd like to talk about separately, please do be in touch. But the final reflection is that this curious week, it is curious in some ways when you think about it. It was started by Interfaith Scotland back in 2004, and Interfaith Week builds on that. They happen at the same time. It is a curious week, but it really is an important one. The more diverse our society gets, the more we need these sorts of opportunities. And I have been struck rather sadly during this period of COVID-19 by the unpleasantness on social media, the hate, the hate speech, the prejudice, alongside all the positive things we deal with. We have to, I guess, remember that we're in a really challenging climate for many people. And the week is both a time to lift up the good and all the positive things that are happening, but also challenge those things that are undercutting the well-being of many in different faith communities. So it's a week which has got lots of very different and equally important reasons to mark it. And I wish everybody the best of success with such plans as you're taking forward. They all sound amazing, the ones we've heard about, and we're really looking forward to hearing more. Ashley, back to you.
Thank you very much, Harriet. And I think that all really that remains for me to do is to first of all thank all of our panel. Thank you for sharing your insights, your experience and your wisdom with us. I think there have been a huge number of practical suggestions and kind of inspirational thoughts, which I hope people are going to take and run with. And also to thank everybody for attending. We had a very good attendance today. Thank you for sending in your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't pick up on all of them. We've done as many as we could. And we look forward to engaging with you all further as we get nearer to Interfaith Week. So thank you very much. We will send out some kind of feedback survey later today or tomorrow morning. So that will go to everybody who registered. But thank you all and have a good afternoon. Goodbye.